Hello, and a big warm welcome to this week's edition of the Soul Sync podcast. Now, if you are joining us for the very first time, firstly, I want to say a big warm welcome to you. Now, what is the Soul Sync all about? What is my mission with this podcast? Well, let me tell you. I'm doing this to help illuminate your path forward, answer some of life's big questions to do with everything from the universe, the power of energy, love, even personal growth. Honestly, the list really is endless. We talk about so many different topics on the Soul Sync, but it's all designed to help you illuminate your path forward. Now, in recent episodes, I've talked a lot recently, well, I've alluded to even, how I have been using binaural beats to help me in my journey. Because I'll tell you what, meditation has not come easily to me. It's been really hard for me to quieten my mind because my mind is like a supercomputer. It does not stop, honestly. And I had been diagnosed with ADHD. I don't take medication for it. I don't think that's a path I want to go down personally. But what I would say is my mind and how busy it is has been great in many regards. It means I've got a really active imagination, and that's helped me a lot in my career. But when it's come to meditation, connecting to the spirit world, sitting in my power, all of those things I kind of struggled with. And binaural beats have really helped me. They've helped me to kind of get into, firstly, quieting down my mind. And they, honestly, if you haven't tried them, they really are powerful. So this week's edition, we've got an expert who is going to explain everything to do with binaural beats. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm not even going to try and explain on this intro what they are, because I'm just going to do a hash job. And the guest we've got is a specialist, and she's going to be able to talk about them so much better than I can. So please allow me to introduce to you my guest this week, Karen Newell. Now, she is the co-founder of a company called Sacred Acoustics. Now, the company is a trailblazer in brainwave entrainment audio meditation. Karen's journey into personal development began with a fascination for ancient cultures and sacred sites, driving her to explore profound questions about existence. Through intensive study and hands-on experience in meditation, lucid dreaming, astral travel, and energy healing, she's become a specialist in spiritually transformative practices. Now, her pioneering work with Sacred Acoustics harnesses binaural beats to expand consciousness, inspire creativity, enhance wellness, and nurture intuition. Now, Karen, alongside Dr. Eben Alexander, who co-authored the influential book Living in a Mindful Universe, they also travel all around the world as well, conducting international workshops on consciousness exploration. So today we're going to be delving into Karen's journey, her innovative approach to brainwave entrainment, and the transformative potential of her work. Now, I use Sacred Acoustics. I believe on this show, and I've always said from the absolute get-go, that anything I mention on this show, I want to make sure is firstly going to be a good product. And I can assure you, when I talk about everything that Sacred Acoustics do, I really believe in the power of binaural beats. So I was really excited to have Karen on. But anyway, without further ado, let's get on with the episode. So Karen, firstly, a massive warm welcome to the Soul Sync podcast.
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you and your audience.
Now, so am I. I'm going to say to the audience from the very get-go, there is a story behind why Karen is very kindly come onto the Soul Sync today. So the story was, and I will give it at the start because I think there is a bit of relevance to the story. So Karen founded and is the owner of a company called Sacred Acoustics. And about 6 months ago, a friend of mine mentioned Sacred Acoustics as being like the gold standard for meditation, binaural beat kind of soundtracks. And then I did, as I was saying to Karen before we pushed the record button, it was on one of my I must look into Jason Post-it notes, which lives all along the bottom of my computer monitor. And then I had Eben Alexander on a few weeks ago. He just happened to mention that his other half is Karen of Sacred Acoustics, and I feel like it's one big synchronicity. So here you are today. So we'll go into Sacred Acoustics more later. But first of all, tell us about you, Karen, and your story, and let's go back in time from the beginning.
Okay, well, from the beginning, I was a very curious child, like many of us are. And as I was looking for my answers, I looked to the traditional sources, school, parents, religious teachings, and all of that. I wanted to know, why are we here? What is our purpose? I never got any satisfactory answer that I said, oh, that's it, right? So obviously, this is a big question that many people have, but we don't have answers to. And so I was kind of struck by that we didn't have this knowledge that could just be explained to kids. And this kind of stuck with me. And when I learned about science and I learned about religion, two kind of seemingly opposing factions, wasn't satisfied with either kind of answer. I thought they were lacking. So as I grew up and became a young adult, this curiosity stayed with me. And of course, I went to college, got a job, got married, had a child, all of those things, but this stuck with me. And so later in life, I think it was the book Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock that turned me on to realizing that there were other people also really dissatisfied with the answers that traditional spirituality and religion and science tell us. And so Graham Hancock was talking about how the Great Pyramids weren't really built when Egyptologists said that they were. I was always fascinated with sacred sites. I knew that their existence was really kind of indicative that there was more to our planetary history than we were told. So all of these things were going through my head. And as I would do all of this reading, I would read different spiritual texts, all kinds of different things that I exposed myself to, theosophical readings, and so on. I learned that direct personal experience will give you the answers to these questions. And, Eastern gurus, when you ask them questions, they like to just answer with another question. And so I realized that the journey is about seeking answers to these questions, but you don't get to it only through reading. And so I began a system of trying all different kinds of techniques to really generate personal experience. And that started with, I learned how to do feng shui. I learned how to use a pendulum to read energy. I learned how to do Reiki. I learned remote viewing, all kinds of things. And in healing touch for animals, that was one of my favorites. But in all of these classes, the teachers would say, now we're going to meditate. And that's where I got stuck. Meditation was not easy for me. And people would, afterwards say, oh, I had this wonderful experience. And I'd be thinking, I just had nothing. And so I didn't understand what that was all about. And so when I tried to meditate, doing things like just following my breath and so on, it was very frustrating. I wasn't getting to samadhi.
Why do you think that you wasn't
like that? The Western person, we're used to following a set of sort of guidelines and getting to that place. And meditation isn't like that at all. So now I know why Eastern gurus answer questions with questions, because it's all about the journey. And in the process of learning to meditate, I did discover that certain types of sound help to quiet the mind. And at first it was things like tuning forks, brass bowls, crystal bowls, anything that gongs, anything that kind of makes a sort of monotonous, regular sound. And what I learned later is that those instruments are actually emitting binaural beats. And it's digital binaural beats that are created not using instruments that really started to help me to get past that blockage where I thought I couldn't meditate. And once I was able to find that inner peace within, I really realized that the more I focused on my inner world, the more my outer world seemed to rearrange itself to match what I was doing inside. And so this was a wonderful discovery. I think that brings us from childhood sort of present.
You did a very good job there, Karen. Why do you, because meditation, firstly, for me, I find it so difficult to quiet my mind. I've got an ADHD brain, so my brain is like a supercomputer at the best of times. Why did you find it difficult back then?
Well, I don't have the ADHD issue. I am very much able to focus, but when I'm focusing, like I was a project manager in a publishing field, so we were constantly having deadlines, and I was like, the buck stops here, it'll all get done at this final step kind of person. And so I was used to maintaining focus, but when it came to maintaining focus just inside my mind, that was not simple because I wasn't doing something. And this was what was so frustrating, I think, really for a lot of us Western kind of thinkers. And so for me, I would just have lists of things going through my head of related to projects I was supposed to be organizing. It's like my brain never shut down from planning and anticipating what was going to come next. That was my nature. And so that's what made it so difficult for me. I could focus, but certainly not on quiet inside my mind, right? I was used to doing something.
So you discovered, it almost seems like kind of, well, I was going to say by accident, but it wasn't an accident, Karen, because you were literally trying every single thing imaginable, which had eventually led you to the binaural beats.
Yeah, and it was about a 2.5-year period. I called it I look back now, or actually at the time I called it my spiritual boot camp, because I was trying so many things, really trying to find the answer. And what I learned is there's no one technique that will work the same for everyone. It really is incumbent on us as individuals, because we're all unique, to find those techniques that work for us. And so for me, it was a combination of several things, but binaural beats was certainly very key to the foundation of it all.
Simply speaking, to explain, because you're going to explain this far better than I, Karen, what are binaural beats?
So binaural beats, so aural just means hearing, and bi means two. So it means you have one signal in one ear, a different signal, slightly different frequency in the other ear, say 100 hertz in one ear, 104 hertz in the other ear. And the difference between those frequencies is what matches up with the brainwave state. So in my example, I gave you a 4 hertz difference. 4 hertz is actually the border between delta and theta. Delta is the state when we're asleep. 0 to 4 hertz is the signal, the electric signal coming out of your brain when measured with an EEG device. And that is the same kind of hertz that we use when we're talking about sound. So it makes it really simple. Now, we can't hear 4 hertz. We can't hear any sounds below 20 hertz. And so when we create these frequencies, it makes sort of this wah, 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 wah sound, which sounds very similar to what I mentioned before, a crystal bowl or a brass bowl. But in that case, there's all these beautiful overtones that take place. So when you create binaural beats, you can go to an app or something and ask for, I want a 4 hertz, you can just ask for whatever you want these days, but they sound very harsh. So when they're combined in different ways, they start to sound more musical. And often people will add pink noise or ocean sounds or something like that. When we create ours at Sacred Acoustics, all of our frequencies are harmonic to each other. And so they come out sounding more like music, which allows us not to have to use so much the pink noise, the white noise, and so on. But we combine them, you can hear a 4 hertz the same time you're hearing an 8 hertz. And it's sometimes those combinations that help your body stay relaxed, but your mind stay aware. And so that's what we're trying to do. Many people listen to binaural beats just to get a good night's sleep, but we're trying to maintain a state where your body is profoundly relaxed, but your mind is still aware. So that's the hypnagogic state, very similar to meditation, that we're trying to achieve with these different tones.
And I must admit that I've been using your delta tone for quite some time for I put it on 10 minutes before bed. Then I know when the right time to take the headphones off is, because I'm literally falling asleep with them on. And I must admit, so I had a few years ago, about how many years ago was it now? About 4 years ago, I got psychosis. And after that, I never slept once through the night. I've always been someone since then where I wake up 4 or 5 times, not for long, but I would get broken night's sleep. And since I've been using that Delta track, I've slept straight through the night for the first time in a very, very long time. And had the most solid night's sleep as a result of playing that. So it's been pretty profound for me. And those tracks as well. So I want to go into this in much more detail, but those sort of free sample tracks during the pandemic, you decided to talk us through the story of this, because I think this is an interesting story in itself.
You're talking about, we have some tracks that are just, that don't have combinations of frequencies, that are only one frequency, and they're called whole delta, the one you were just talking to,
yes,
whole theta and whole alpha. And during the pandemic, we made these recordings available at no cost. And that is because 1 month before the pandemic began in February of 2020, we had a pilot study done about a year and a half earlier, and it had just been published in February 2020 in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease. And what someone had done, Dr. Anna Yusum is a psychiatrist, a Yale-trained psychiatrist in New York City, and she had prescribed this set of recordings to her patients. Now, they're 3 brainwave state, but 9 different recordings, shorter ones, longer ones, some with guidance, some without guidance, very flexible. And she also gave them instructions on how to use them. And what she found was, after 2 weeks of listening, these patients reduced their anxiety by 26%. Now, the control group, these are her patients who only got their regular therapy but didn't listen to the recordings. They saw their anxiety reduced by just 7% during that time. So giving someone this activity to do at home really helped them. And it wasn't only anxiety. That's what she measured using a well-validated psychiatric research form, but she also found people were resolving, toxic relationships. They were getting better sleep. Like you said, they were performing better on their medical board tests and so on. And so lots of different benefits from this. And so that's why when the pandemic began, I thought, everyone was thinking, what can I do? What can I do to help? And that's what I did. I thought, everyone is suddenly anxious around the entire world. If we can only help reduce that anxiety, and many people were anxious because they had no money. They were losing their jobs, many people, and had to stay home and so on. And so we made it available. I reduced the price to just $19. It gets translated into whatever currency the country is, $19 US. But there's also a free option. So anyone who doesn't have the finances, even $19, some foreign countries, $19 turns into quite a lot of funds.
Yes.
You can select the free option, and that will give you the MP3 version of the exact same recordings. And that is my gift to help reduce anxiety that, honestly, I still feel exists in this world, even as they say we're post-pandemic. The anxiety only seems to be increasing with all of the turmoil going on in our world. And so, earlier I talked about how focusing on my inner world, finding my inner peace, helped to sort of rearrange my outer world, the world around me. So I have to think that the more of us collectively who really take the time to do this, that we are not only helping ourselves, we're helping all of those people around us. And so that is what I hope will be the result of this gift to anyone who needs it.
Well, if anyone wants to find out the details of these tracks, it will be in the show notes. I want to say as well, because we have this, and I think the US is the same, but when you go and see your, we call it general practitioner, GP here, you go and see your doctor. We have this issue in this country, I think, where we are trying to medicate our way out of a mental health problem by putting people on sertraline. Myself, I went to the GP when I was 23 years old, told them I was having a bit of anxiety. Really, probably on reflection, Karen, it was usual 23-year-old life problems. And then I found myself on this drug. Do you think that, because I think I know the answer straight away, but I think holistic medicine and things like this, why is it not explored more? Do you think we're getting more in that direction where practitioners are starting to think, rather than putting someone on an anxiety drug, this kind of treatment is going to start being more widely used?
Yeah, really interesting question. So I think there's a mix right now. I think more and more people are making these recommendations. I have physicians, MDs, not just, alternative practitioners, but MDs who are referring patients to our recordings. I can talk about that in a second, but the use of medication, way overused. I have a story of my own. When my daughter was in high school, I thought she was going through regular teenage problems, maybe a little worse than mine were, but she had a lot of anxiety. She had a lot of issues and ended up in a facility for a time. And the doctors there, because I would not agree as her parent to allow her to take those medications, reason being, she was busy abusing those medications. She had taken them from her friends. They traded them. This was just the trend, back in the early 2000s. And maybe still is, I don't know, but she didn't need her own supply of drugs. So I refused. But the doctor actually told me that I was borderline abusing my daughter for not giving her the medications. I got out of that facility as soon as I could. There are doctors who will start court orders to force parents to do things for their children. And sometimes maybe it's for the best. In this case, I couldn't imagine being forced to give my child these medications, because I think she would have used them to, if she had enough of them, to do something kind of self-damaging, I'll say, because that was her tendency. And now, much, much later, she tells me, yes, Mom, you are correct. That is exactly what I would have done. And so I have no regrets. And that doctor was incorrect. But nowadays, more and more people are realizing that these medications are actually sometimes bad for us. So there's a doctor in the US, he's in Florida, actually, Dr. Mark Leeds. He helps people withdraw from, and benzoid, I don't know the right name for them, the
benzodiazepines.
Yeah, those, and others, opioids and all kinds of things. So they have other drugs, especially for opioids, that they can give people to help with their withdrawal symptoms, but they can't give them anything, say if they're feeling a little anxious or they can't sleep or focus. And so he prescribes the recordings. So while they're trying to withdraw from these harmful medications, the recordings are actually helping them. And interestingly enough, the addiction doctor tells me that whole delta is his patient's favorite. And that doesn't surprise me, because that's the most calming one that we have. And most people fall asleep when they listen, but some who have really hard time falling asleep, they're just happy to get a little relaxation listening to whole delta. So they work differently for everybody. I will caution your listeners, and because we all have different brainwave states to begin with. They're like fingerprints, I learned. Our brainwave states are so unique from one to the other that we can be identified by them as individuals. And so it's no wonder we all respond differently when listening to these recordings.
I think I don't want to go too much down this rabbit hole of medication, but I think that, you only have to look at the drug companies and the way that we operate in the West by trying to treat the symptoms rather than that of the cause, I think, a lot of the time. And, when you look at Eastern medicine and Eastern philosophy, it's very, very different. I want to go into, because we've talked about Delta.
Can I make a comment on that real quick?
Yes, please do.
I think another aspect of that is that the Western world is driven by the worldview of materialism, that only the physical world is real. All of that spiritual stuff is an illusion, right? Our hopes, our dreams, love, all of that, they think it's just hormone reactions in the brain. And so why wouldn't a medication just fix everything? So it's that worldview that drives the attitude that a substance can fix whatever substance in our brain is causing the trouble. But that's not the answer. Many, 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 many others have found that spiritual, mental, emotional aspects are what really affects our health. And I want to point out, when I say spiritual, all that means to me is that you have a sense of meaning, a sense of overriding purpose, and a sense of connection to something greater than yourself. It has nothing to do with any religion.
I think that's a point very well made, actually, Karen. So thank you for that. So I want to go on to talk more about the binaural beats, because I'm on my own journey with them. I'm at the very beginning of one of the tracks, Heart Presence. I reached out to Karen because I'm trying to develop my mediumship. And it's a journey that I'm not going to go over the story because I've said it a couple of times on this podcast, but I've been trying to develop my mediumship. But the big problem I've had is meditation. And I noticed on the Sacred Acoustics site, on the very beautiful app that you've got, that you had a bundle there that is designed to help you connect with other forms of consciousness. But it turns out that you've got bundles for lots of different things, Karen, which leads me on to sort of ask you, because a lot of what these binaural beats can do and what they've done for people, and like you said, everyone's experience is different, is talk to us about the kind of inner guidance. Some people can get inspiration, develop intuition. How is the binaural beats doing this, Karen?
Well, the binaural beats are helping to relax your body, relax your mind, so that you can really identify that part of you that is not your thoughts, that is not your fears, that, all those things we're used to running through our minds. There's something else there. And the Eastern traditions who really brought meditation to the West, they talk about an inner observer or an inner witness, something else that's behind all of those thoughts. And you can think of that as your essence, as your soul, but that aspect of you that exists, whether your body is alive or not, the part of you that it's the non-physical part of you, we'll say, the part of you that as a medium, when you're connecting with another deceased person, that part of you can access that part of you while you're still in this body, but you have to get behind those racing thoughts. And that's the value of meditation, maintaining that singular focus. And so when I used to do this, my mind would wander and I would get really mad at myself. And I would say, oh, you don't know how to do this. You can't meditate. And all I was doing was I was just kind of negative self-talk. I was really, gosh, I can't find the word. I was really just confirming. Yes.
I know what you're saying, Karen.
Yeah. And so as I moved forward, I realized I need to change how I think of this. And so every time I would think, oh, I can't meditate, I would tell myself, no, you can meditate. And listening to these recordings, very interestingly, really helped. And so what would happen at first is my mind would wander and I would get mad at myself, but then I would return my attention to my breath or whatever phrase I was repeating or whatnot. And every time I did it, I realized I was practicing the focus. So every time it happened, I turned that into a celebration instead of a failure. I thought, oh, I just noticed again, and I returned my attention. And so changing how we kind of manage our thinking during this process is really important. But then as I moved forward, I realized that I would sometimes get emotional. And again, I thought, oh, I'm doing this wrong. This is going to distract me. But then I realized every time I got emotional, I would end up during the experience identifying some trigger from the past or releasing something. I didn't necessarily have to know what it was, but I would feel better afterwards. And so then I began to realize that was part of the process, that the binaural beats helped to relax my body and then move my attention to whatever it is that soul or inner observer part of me wanted my attention to go. I hope that makes sense. And so in some cases, that was releasing these traumas. And it turned out these traumas were preventing me from accessing my intuition, from being able to move forward. And so going through this process involved really letting go a lot of these, I'll call them unprocessed emotions. And those unprocessed emotions, those were the things that once I got cleared out, that really helped to kind of rearrange my outer world, as I said earlier. And so those traumas, and sometimes they're really minor, sometimes they're really major. Some of us have had horrible abuse as children, so much that we've dissociated during that abuse. And in that case, you may need the assistance of a therapist, but most of us have traumas that, you know, we've really inflated in our own systems that seem so scary to even address that, you know, every time I would start to feel myself cry, I would think, why are these binaural beats doing this to me? And then I realized, no, they're actually just calling attention to something already in my system, right? And so when people write to me and talk about this, their own process, some of them will find these emotional moments. And each of them, I just tell them, bravo, you've done it. You know, going through the dark night of the soul, touching those parts of you that you really don't want to touch, that's not fun. The other side is where you get your reward, but it's no wonder that we avoid this sort of thing. So some people, when they start to get emotional and I tell them what's going on, they're like, I'm not doing this anymore, because they're just not ready. But once they're ready, it can be for some a very useful tool. But that's what you got to kind of go through, many of us, not all of us, before you can get to this space where you're able to contact inner guidance and all of these things. Many times these come up very surprisingly. And other times we can use our intention to kind of open that door. And the way I recommend doing that, say, if you want to, you know, touch some inner guidance, is just ask a question, pose a question at the beginning of your meditation, and then just kind of let it go. Don't constantly think about it, and open yourself to receiving an answer. Sometimes the answer will come during meditation. Other times it'll come later through a synchronicity, a dream, a chance meeting. But it's a process. It's a continuum. Your meditative state is just part of what your consciousness is going through in a day. So it's not just a singular event where it all has to happen, right? So you always want to pay attention if your questions aren't answered right during that meditative session.
I was thinking to myself just now, should I go down a rabbit hole, which I'm about to go down, or shall I not? This does happen a lot. I'm going to attempt it, but I'm probably going to do an absolute hash job of trying to explain it. Very simply, and someone said this to me the other day, you know, we have cells and cells of membranes, and deep, you know, if you break down and go really far down on a molecular level, there is memory in these membrane cells and whatever. And these emotions that we can have, of, like you said, things that can happen to us when we're very young, if we don't outlet them at the time, they do get stored deep within our body somewhere. And I was thinking to myself when I learnt that, am I going to have this experience where I feel that a lot of my trauma I've probably processed? I've had the dark night of the soul. I think I'm through that now. And it did, when you sort of sent me the recordings, and it had the very helpful PDF that went in to explain that you might have these emotions, these things might happen. I was thinking to myself, is there anything that I haven't processed or been at peace with? So I guess I'm yet to find that out, Karen. And I do feel that I'm ready to embrace that. So you directed me when I kind of explained my objective to, you know, expand my consciousness or whatever. You directed me to a heart bundle. Why have you directed me firstly to the heart? Because generally speaking, as you said, we created these bundles. Some of them are just standalone bundles related to different things like health or end of life or something like that. But this was meant to be sort of, I got so many questions from people. Where should I start? What should my process be? They didn't want to decide for themselves. And so I created what I thought would be a nice progression. So the whole mind bundle is the one I spoke about already, that helps really create a foundation, helps you learn how you respond to these recordings. And then most people that I've come across, you know, are interested in issues to do with relationships and connection and, you know, developing their intuition and so on. And so that's where the heart comes in. And heart meditation was another one of my personal tools, along with the binaural beats. I learned a form of Sufi heart rhythm meditation where you actually
align your breathing with the beating of your heart. And heart presence actually combines some of those practices with the binaural beats, because in heart presence, the one that you mentioned earlier, you're actually imagining your breath moving in different directions through your heart. So around your heart or up and down through your heart and so on. And it really does bring different sensations. Now, all of those recordings contain alpha frequencies. So keep that in mind, because some people, when they listen to alpha frequencies, they make them a little nervous. And so I know that it was a risk including alpha frequencies, but many, many other people find them to be just perfect. So it's a little tricky. Theta seems to be the one that is more universally liked by most people, but not everyone. So it just depends. But
again, like you said, it's very personal.
Yeah. But the heart just seems to be a really important part of who you are. And so kind of integrating who that heart energy really is, part of, that seems to me to be an important step in the process before we start, moving on to the whole spirit bundle, which some people start right there, people who have had a lot of experience and have already done all of this. But that's where you can maybe have an out-of-body experience, have a past life memory, kind of the more glamorous things that people think about when they want to do this sort of thing. But I didn't get those answers until I went through my heart process. And so I would say a lot of it just, we teach what we know, right? And so
yes.
I used my own process and observing others to kind of make these recommendations. But I know for certain that not every process will work the same way for all of us. So tons of flexibility within that system. Some binaural beat people, producers, they have very strict rules. One in particular asks that you listen to this one recording for 6 months before moving on to the next.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it costs a fortune compared to ours. So I leave a lot of room for flexibility, because some people.
What's the process? And I was going to say the technology. How did you decided you were going to do this? Where on earth did you start, Karen? How did you, what was the process of actually putting this together? Did you test it on a brain? Did you wire your husband up to see what was the process like of building this company?
My story would have gotten very long at the beginning, but what happened was I was at a workshop exploring sound and using it to get into these expanded states. And I met someone named Kevin Kossi. And he is a mechanical and electrical engineer who lives in New York City. He is the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics. And it was he and I who started doing this on our own. We met back in 2010. And he told me that he wanted to make his own binaural beats. He was an engineer, and that's their nature. And I thought he was a nut because he wasn't a musician. We didn't know anything about audio. And I was like, you're crazy. But he found out that I had a huge library of all different binaural beats and different types of meditation music that I had acquired during my spiritual boot camp. And so he wanted to get his hands on those. And so I had been living in Baltimore at the time. That's about a 4-hour drive south of New York, but we didn't see each other much. We did all of this remotely. And so he would at first just take recordings I already had, and he would copy and paste them to be longer or rearrange them just for our own kind of personal journeys. And so what we would do is we would listen at the same time and then get on the phone and tell each other about our experience. And over time, we started to have some common experiences. And that was really interesting. But after a time, we realized that copying other people's binaural beats would only get us so far. And so we sort of analyzed, he did most of it, but we would share a Skype screen back at the time and look at them together. And he learned how to find them, how they were made. He learned the formulas of many other binaural beat producers that we could reproduce their recordings if we wanted to, but we don't. We created all completely unique frequency formulas because we didn't want to copy what someone else had done. And in the process, Kevin figured out the way to, combine the frequencies harmonically, like I mentioned earlier. He also learned a way to incorporate monaural beats and adjusting the volume in each ear in all these kind of different ways. And so we call our binaural beats neural helix because of this unique way that we put them together. People need to realize that all binaural beat producers do it a little bit differently. And so listening to them really gives you an idea of what is going to be effective for you. I'm glad there's many producers because I'm very pleased that your friend said we were the gold standard. But I do know that some people prefer other binaural beats to ours, and that's okay, right? Because we're all unique and we need all of these producers to meet all of our different needs.
Yeah, I do you know what? Because you just said something there. When you, and forgive me, I've forgotten the name of your
Kevin.
Kevin. When you and Kevin were having those similar experiences, I wonder now the company is obviously, is where it is today. Have you found that maybe like someone in, a completely different part of the world who's grown up with completely different culture, understanding, worldview, are you finding that people are reporting back to you similarities from different parts of the globe using these?
Yes.
They're having the same experiences.
Yeah, I have listeners all over Europe, Australia, mostly English speakers, right? Because we're English, but South Africa, we have people living in Asia who speak English. So lots of people. And yes, they're all having similar type, within the range of experiences. I don't think culturally there's a difference. There might be a difference, say, in their ability to respond. Like people in India, they grow up just understanding what meditation is, and it's a part of their process. People in China, they grow up, or at least the older generation, I'm not sure about the younger, but the older generation with Qigong, that movement exercise that they do, right? And so cultures who already have that kind of, Tibetan monks have listened to our recordings. And what they say is, oh my gosh, they think they're amazing because they help you get to those places much, much quicker than the 10,000 hours they're expected to practice to be an expert, right? We don't have that kind of time here in the West. And so I think of these binaural beats as training wheels. They help us get to those states a little bit quicker, right? Because I think we need a little bit of a head start so we can catch up.
I look at them as a bit of a shortcut, but not in a way that is, because you might think a shortcut is a cutting of a corner, but it's not. It's a very powerful aid. And do you know? Because have you come across the Gateway tapes?
Yeah, yes. I listened to them. That was one of the first binaural beats I've listened to. Yes. That
was my first doorway into it. No one who knows what the Gateway tapes is, please Google it, because I'm not even going to try to explain what they are, because we could spend the next 15 minutes talking about them. But really briefly, it was a government experiment the CIA did decades ago, which the report was declassified and they were released. And they are funny because the man who talks on them, it's very instructional, but I don't even know what I'm talking about, the Gateway tapes.
Well, they still exist. And it's not just for the CIA remote viewing. They use them for all kinds of stuff. It's funny, Bob Monroe, back when they were making these tapes, it was back in the 70s, 1970s, 80s. And they were tapes. That's why people still call them tapes. They were cassette tapes. And but they're on CD now. But at any rate, he would not let anyone take these recordings home because he thought that they were so powerful that people would just freak out and not know what to do. And I think we've come a long way since then, that people kind of do know how to manage themselves. So
they sound like a 70s thing, don't they? Even the man that talks on them, you could just see it's from that era.
Because they haven't updated them. I wanted to mention that Kevin and I, we started this process, but it was Eben Alexander. We both met him 1 year into our kind of personal play with all of this. And it was actually Eben Alexander who said, you got to make these available to the world. And Kevin and I had already come up with some maybe URLs, maybe one day. And so we had Sacred Acoustics and we thought, okay, we're going to do it. And when Eben's book came out, his book came out 1 year after I met him, and very fast track process because he hadn't even met his agent when I met him. And when his book came out and he was on the Dr. Oz show, which is no longer airing, but he was on the Dr. Oz show, and Dr. Oz wanted to do a demo with the binaural beats, and he wanted to give his audience a sample. And so we gave them a sample of our stuff and with a disclaimer that needed to be with it for you can't drive, you consult your doctor if you have history of seizures, things like that. And their legal team said, oh, we're not putting this on our website. And give us a link. They said, give us a link to it. So since my work background involves web development, I created a website and I put the free download there and one little field to put their email address in. And within 2 weeks, we had gathered 5,000 email addresses. And
wow.
Then we started making our recordings and then offering them to people. And I
think it's a beautiful name, Sacred Acoustics, as well.
I do too. We were really pleased that it came up, and no one was using that phrase naturally. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I wanted to ask, kind of to sort of end the show back on you. Obviously, where we got to with your journey was Karen who can't meditate. We're now Karen of Sacred Acoustics with loads of bundles. What's your relationship like with the universe now and all things consciousness? What's your, where are you today, Karen, in your understanding of your quest for knowing, your curiosity, that Karen who was searching for answers?
Well, I'll tell you, Jason, the journey continues. I have not found all the answers, but I don't think I should have found all the answers or I wouldn't need to still be here. Right. So that's, I learned that I don't need to have all the answers. That was a very big process to go through. But I went through another aspect of a dark night of the soul during the pandemic. And when you, Jason, said that you thought you might be kind of finished processing all your stuff, that's what I thought too.
No. Yeah,
I know. It's like peeling. I used to be told by spiritual teachers, it's like peeling a layer of an onion. And boy, there was another layer there. And so I can't be certain that there's not another one. I just can't be certain. And yet I feel very content, as I said, as the more I kind of focused on clearing my traumas, finding that inner peace, feeling my connection to something greater, feeling my heart energy when I'm out in the world, when I connect with nature, when I connect with other people. I have this very, very extreme awareness of how that connection is working. And that's a very beautiful thing that I never, ever, ever want to take for granted that I didn't have before. And so that's where I am now, very open to what's to come. But I resolved many, many relationship issues. I am now, Eben and I found each other. I don't know if you realize we're in a personal relationship.
Well, I only did, but this all seems, Karen, like one big synchronicity, because it was Eben's book, which was I'll tell you the story, and I've said this story, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway because it's an interesting story. So me and my mum, a few years ago, we went to Greece, and she started talking about death, and I said to her, "Mum, please don't talk about that. It's a subject I hate. I don't want to talk about it. It's the end." Anyway, she then out of her suitcase said, "Look, take this book that I've been reading. It's really good." And it was Eben's book. So I read it, and it started to make me think, hang on a minute, which then led me down a whole rabbit hole. I keep saying rabbit hole today. A whole journey of researching near-death experiences, which really prompted me to think, hang on a minute, is there more to this life? And perhaps, because I played the whole game, Karen, of thinking that material possessions were the root of all my answers, because I grew up with not a lot in West London. I grew up from a very modest background, and then went through this whole journey of thinking that once I'd built my multi-million-pound company, I'd be happy. And then I got to the point of running it with the most money I'd ever had, thinking I'm the most bloody miserable I've ever been. Yeah. So, and then, you know, that's kind of where my journey started. So it was actually Eben's book that prompted this whole kind of catalyst of investigation, so to speak.
Very cool. Yeah, his story has inspired lots of people. Often it is around the death subject, parents who've lost children, children who've lost parents, spouses who've lost spouses. It doesn't really matter. Death is a really hard thing for people to deal with usually. And I'm fortunate I haven't lost a parent or a child. And so I haven't had to go through that experience, but I can imagine how devastating it would be. And yet, when people have this knowledge that it's not the end, that you will meet again, because that's what all the near-death experience and many other research tells us. It's not just near-death experiences, but we will meet again. While we're here and we're not in the physical presence of those loved ones, boy, is that challenging. But those who have this understanding, they get through the grief in such a smoother fashion. And they still miss their loved ones, but they understand they're not really gone. So the near-death experience literature often will be encountered by those who are struggling with the death of a loved one. But other things too, like you said, miracle healings are another one. People, you know, because Evan came out of his coma, suddenly healed. How could that be? You know, touching the spiritual realm somehow played a role. And, you know, mediumship readings can do the same thing. I know mediums who have gotten information for their sitters from their loved ones who have passed that has cleared up, you know, lifelong issues that they've been holding on to for decades. And this one reading from the medium will just heal them. They'll realize, oh my gosh, my mom really did love me, or something like that, you know? So touching that spiritual realm in that way really does seem to have powerful healing effects. So even the process of meditation can have similar healing effects, right? It may not be in quite a, you know, bang your head with a board kind of fashion. It might just be a little slower, but sometimes slower and steady is the better way to get there. You got to be careful what you wish for. Some people like, I want to see auras and spirits. And then when the people who do see spirits are like, oh my God, make them go away. And so you got to be careful.
You got to be careful what you wish for, as the saying goes, Karen. Do you know what? I honestly love what you do, and I think that your tracks are amazing, and it's becoming a big part of my routine. Lastly, Karen, would you like to leave us on a final thought or a pearl of wisdom to close the episode today?
I would. And I think I would like to focus on this idea of loving yourself. And, you know, when you asked about the heart tapes, this is like a foundational, well, mine aren't tapes, the heart recordings, I'll say. This is something that really every human on the planet needs to understand. It's our birthright to know this love that we came from. You brought up near-death experiences that people talk about when their awareness goes to the other realm, that they feel this amazing sense of love. That's our birthright. That's where we come from. We come here and we forget all that, and we think, oh, I'm just nothing, and that person's more important than me, and I don't really deserve to be loved. All of those things we do, we're all familiar with this. But if you can love yourself, this is what prepares you for loving others, for getting through rough times, for bouncing back, for being more resilient, from healing if you are faced with a challenge. Finding that way to love yourself starts with generating gratitude in your heart. This was one of the foundational practices I learned while I was using binaural beats. You can do this any time of the day. Generate feelings of gratitude, not thoughts in your head. It can take some time to spark a feeling of gratitude, but continue to think and remind yourself of memories that brought you joy. And one day you will feel that spark of gratitude in your heart. And that is the beginning of finding that love from within. And anyone who takes time to do this, please accept my gratitude, because I know that as you're helping yourself, you're helping others around you, including me. And so thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Thank you, Jason, for inviting me to share all of this with your listeners. I love hearing about your journey too.
Oh, Karen, it's been a delight. Thank you for coming onto the Soul Sync.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm looking forward to hearing how your journey progresses with using Sacred Acoustics recordings and how you might progress in your mediumship abilities.
I'm going to be telling you. I'm definitely going to be telling you, because your tracks are a big part of it. It solved my meditation issue, Karen.
Awesome. Very good.
Well, there we go. That was the incredible Karen Newell, who's from Sacred Acoustics. Now, as she said, if you do want to give binaural beats a go, rather than just going straight onto YouTube and just downloading a track from there, I'd really recommend going over to Sacred Acoustics, because actually they give a starter bundle for completely free, and that's what I used when I was first dabbling with them. And if you go on the website, you get 3 tracks for free, which is the Delta, the Theta, and the Alpha brainwave state tracks. Really good to experiment with, especially if you've had a stressful day or you're struggling to sleep, because I honestly had broken sleep. I'd wake up 3-4 times a night. And now I listen to the Delta track every night before I go to sleep, and actually my sleep has massively improved. Now, do remember, as always, I love hearing from you. I love your comments. I love your ideas for future episodes. So do remember, you can always drop me a line on my email address, which is in the show notes. There is a Facebook page which you can go over to if you want to hear more from me, hear what I'm up to. And obviously there is the YouTube channel where I post all of my progress to do with my mediumship. This has been The Soul Sync. I'm Jason Paul. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, a big warm goodbye.